What is your advice for young players learning to practice? Tuning in with my student. Awesome. Um, Learning to practice. I think the most important thing about learning to practice is to differentiate what is the difference between practicing and just playing. So, the difference to me is when you're practicing, you're really breaking stuff down and you're most likely sounding bad. If you're only playing things that you sound good on, you're probably not practicing. You should sound like you don't know what you're doing, basically, because you don't, and you're trying to get better. You're trying to fill in the holes. You're trying to um, add skills. You're trying to learn new things. So specifically, I can speak to what happens when students are learning tunes a lot is that they'll just turn on a play along, whether it be Aebersold, I Real B, and they'll just play chorus after chorus after chorus after chorus after chorus, saying, I'm getting more familiar with the tune. And while that might be true, are you really learning anything? Or are you just kind of practicing the habits that you already have? You're ingraining those habits, not even practicing them. You're learning to internalize bad habits potentially. So I think about practicing jazz in particular. You have to be breaking stuff down. You have to be thinking about how am I getting better at this. You have to think about how can I do this. I always try to approach it, and I learned this from working with my friend Chris Teal when we started the Institute for Creative Music. This idea of whole, part, whole, meaning we approach the whole thing, whatever it might be. We break down the concepts, right, that are inside. We work on the concepts. And then we put it back together again. So whole, part, whole, just like you would do with an etude, just like you would do with a lot of anything that you'd be practicing on the classical side. It's that idea of whole, part, whole. So I take that into context when I'm thinking about trombone technique also, and thinking about, okay, what are all the parts of the technique? There's slide technique, there's articulation, there's sound, there's lip slurs / flexibility, there's style, there's vibe, there's vibrato, there's like different colors to the sound. There's matching the flow of eighth notes. There's lots of different aspects that we can work out individually and then kind of put them all back together again. So it's kind of like Humpty Dumpty, right? Push them off the wall, put them back together. That's kind of how I view practicing. And I think the most important thing to get comfortable with, and most students have a hard time with, is being okay with sounding bad. Because you should sound bad when you're practicing. And if you're sounding good all the time, you're probably not practicing as effectively as you can. You're just running through stuff, which is cool. And there's a time and a place for running through stuff. How do you go about breaking down learning a standard, or how do you instruct students to do so? These questions go hand in hand. This is great. So how to learn standards, how to break them down. That's a really great question, and one that we all need to kind of reckon with if we're going to play this music, jazz music. So I think the most important thing is to throw away your real book. That's the first part. That was when I started really learning how to play. It was when I threw away my real book and started to learn tunes always from the recording in the oral tradition, or rather than from a written music tradition. And it really opened my ears, opened my skills set, and allowed me to learn more tunes faster, even though it sucks at first. It's hard at first. To learn changes by ear, to learn melodies by ear. So basically what I do is this. I say listen to as many different versions as you can find and figure out what is the essence of the melody, because you're going to hear Chet Baker sing it different than JJ would play it versus Freddie Hubbard's going to play it. So if you check out those different versions, you can kind of figure out what's kind of the common denominators here. What is the melody and what are the decorations? So you can kind of get a pretty good cross section. If like Ella Fitzgerald has a version, or Nat King Cole, Frank Sinatra, most of them sing the melodies pretty close. So I go to something like that to get a pretty good handle on it, learn the melody, and then I sit down and try to learn the changes at the piano. And all you have to do, I'm not a great pianist by any means. I would never play a gig on piano, but in a lesson or something like that, which can kind of get through, just play the roots, the thirds and the sevenths, and get through it, slowly, in time, but slow, and break down the harmony, play those thirds, sevenths, and roots. And that's going to get you 80 to 90% of what you would possibly need. And that allows you to internalize the harmony and the melody, because it really has nothing to do with trombone playing to learn a song. It's really just getting it into a memory in your head, because you know that there's certain songs, I'm sure from your childhood, that are of different styles that frontwards, backwards, and sideways, because you just heard them so many times. And often I find that students will jump ahead and not listen enough times to the tune before they try to just memorize it straight away because it's an assignment at school. And that's not really gonna cut it in terms of like efficiency. You're trying to learn it before you've actually learned how it goes. So half the time you're just trying to remember how it goes rather than learning the song or working on the song. So break it down. Melody, harmony, and then try to make them indistinguishable from one another, that the melody doesn't exist without the harmony, and that harmony goes right with that melody. So by that I mean like there's certain colors on dominant chords, there's certain qualities of major and minor chords that really correspond to what the melody notes are. So I try to learn them, put them together, play it on piano, sing it while playing it, and then pick up the trombone, because that all the tune learning stuff doesn't have too much to do with trombone playing, unless we're talking about like a bebop tune, confirmation, something hard, something, moment's notice, something like that, where there's a lot to work out on the trombone too. But generally for like most standards, most songbook standards, we can kind of just learn the tune away from the horn and then come back and deal with it that way. So that's what I do. That's what I try to get students to do. It is very difficult to get students to do that. For your information, if you are also a trombone teacher, to get them to throw away the real books and do it the hard way, that is a challenge. So but as soon as you start doing it, the easier and easier it gets. So the sooner you can do it, the better. What do people usually do in jazz-based lessons? There seems to be a lot of established rep for classical teachers like Rochu and Exers, but not so much for jazz. I think that there are certain things that are pretty standard. I still do Rochu. I still do, I like to use the Biche book. I like to use Arbin's book. I like to use Bach cello suites. Those are some go-to things that I like to have students do just to keep the trombone techniques together. I don't think there's any real better thing to use than those. So there's those established kind of trombone pedagogical things, but then there's transcriptions and tunes basically, and you got to learn the vocabulary. So I don't really use jazz etudes in my lessons unless the student composes it themselves as an exercise. So we go to transcriptions. So we go to JJ, we go to Slide Hampton, we go to Curtis Fuller, we go to people that they like, sometimes modern people like Michael Deese and Steve Davis and Marshall Gilkes, Ryan Keberly, James Burton. There's lots of people, Wycliffe Gordon and Steve Turre. So I send them to corresponding weaknesses, basically. So if we're working on a certain style of playing, like perhaps we're working on, so it's sending someone to JJ to kind of work on clean articulation, clear ideas, melodic ideas, sending someone to Steve Davis to get like a relaxed feel and just like a melodic approach to playing over changes and regular harmony. That's basically what jazz lessons look like. It's playing over tunes, playing transcriptions, composing music. I have my students compose things like either tunes or arrangements or just all different things, all different types of compositions, because I feel like improvisation and composition they go hand in hand. You can't be a great improviser without being able to think of music, right? So you have to think about it in real time and also out of time. So we kind of go back and forth between those things. Then there's just trombone technique and kind of being able to work on slide technique and all the normal things that you would do, but kind of put into this style. So we study different styles, we study different eras. Some students, I try to give them a whole overview. Sometimes we do pixie, plunger stuff. Sometimes we do big band kind of stuff, sight reading stuff. I like to play duets. So Brian, I hope that gives you a good idea. It's kind of the same, except doing a lot of improvisation, trading, playing back and forth, showing vocabulary, bits of vocabulary, playing the piano, understanding harmony, talking about music theory. I guess there's a lot more of that probably than would be necessarily in a classical lesson, but just trying to understand harmony and voice leading and all of that, and improvising those things like harmony and voice leading and things like that. How do you like to try new things in your compositions? In other words, how do you avoid writing similar stuff over and over again? I think there's a certain amount of similar stuff that comes out in my music. Similar sounds or similar like root movement or similar things because you like certain things. You like the sound of certain colors. You like the sounds. So sometimes they just kind of work their way in. So some ways around that to try new things is to incorporate different compositional approaches, meaning like, okay, if I write a tune in a certain key and I'm like, oh, this sounds like another tune that I already wrote, I'll say, okay, well, what happens if I play it in a different key? And usually a different key will send me in a different direction. Because to me, different keys have a different feel. Like B flat feels a lot different to me than G, for example. I like G a lot more than B flat. B flat feels very bland to me. E flat feels very bland, kind of bleh. But like D and G feel, and G flat, those all feel like richer to me. Like G and D are brighter, but G flat and D flat are kind of warm to me in my ears, and I just how I hear things. But so if I move things from one key to another, it kind of changes the context of the melody. Like if it was dark and then put it into a bright key, it kind of feels different and gives you different ideas about where you might go with it. Hello, Hike. Hope you're doing well. How's Eastman? So I think about putting in different key is one, and then like using just traditional classical quote unquote techniques like what would happen if I played this in inversion or retrograde, or what would happen if I kind of break this down to its essence, the essence of the idea, and then reorchestrate it in a different way. What happens if I do the harmony first? What happens if I do the melody first? What happens if, just trying those different things. And then not really judging myself too much about if it does sound like something else, and saying, well, this sounds kind of similar, but that's all right. I'll just write something more tomorrow, and creating a practice, compositional practice. The best things for me come out in compositions when I'm doing it regularly, like every day or every week at least, and kind of putting a few hours a week into composing, just like if you're writing, text, putting just some consistent time and effort into it each and every day or every week. Leads to new ideas. And for me, that's super helpful. So I hope that helps you, Spencer. Just keep writing, keep exploring, keep learning new tunes, look at scores, discover new sounds, just try different things. When something catches your interest, like I listen to a lot of pianists and guitarists, and when there's some kind of like interesting voice leading or interesting kind of harmony, I try to transcribe it and say, what is that? How can I use that? So listen to composers you like, steal stuff from them. That's whatever we all do, right? So I think Stravinsky talked about that, right? The greatest composers steal, right? So that's how it goes, man. You just got to steal, make it your own. But keep writing. That's the best advice I can give you. Keep writing, and eventually you'll find some stuff that's new, and push yourself to write for new ensembles. Or, I do find I write differently if I'm at the piano than if I'm on the trombone. There's certain easy things to do on piano. There's certain easy things to do on trombone. So often I like to sing what I'm playing to see if it feels right. Does it feel good? Is it too notey? Is it not notey enough? Is it boring? You got to sing it usually to feel how that feels. So hope that helps you. How many students do you have in your studio, undergrad and graduate? I just looked. 17 are in the studio right now. The undergrads, the freshmen and sophomores, aren't studying with me at the moment, but they take classical lessons for the first 2 years. For the first year, we do a class called Jazz Styles and Analysis. No, that's not what it's called. It's called Jazz Performance Fundamentals. And our Jazz Performance Fundamentals class is taught by me, and it's basically like a group lesson with the first year students, and we talk about playing and improvising and playing in big bands and stuff like that. But so right now we got 17. I don't know exactly what the breakdown is. I wrote it down last night, and my paper's out in the other room. But that's where we're at the moment. But overall, the trombone studio has, I think, about 80 to 90 between all 4 faculty members. There's Tony Baker, Natalie Mannix, and Steve Menard. So he's talking about getting mechanical licenses for streaming and for printing CDs. So this is a left turn. So let's go left here and talk about music business for just a second. So what he's talking about is when you do a cover song and you put it on your album, what is a mechanical license and why do you need to have it and when do you need to have it? So if you are printing CDs and you're going to sell them, you need to get a mechanical license for all the ones that you're going to sell. all the ones you're going to print and sell. So if you're doing 500, you can get 500 mechanical licenses. It comes out to, there's a standard rate. I forget exactly what it is, but it's like for the first 3 minutes, and then it's for some 4 minutes. No, 5 minutes, and then it's for so many minutes after that first 5 minutes. It's like 9 cents or something like that. But it also depends on the composer and all those things. So I use two websites. I use songfile.com, or this is kind of, it looks very scammy, but it's totally cool, is easysonglicensing.com. I've used both those for years, and those are cool, but you need to have mechanical licenses for printing and for streaming and for downloads. So if you're going to sell downloads on your website, you need to have it. If you're going to sell streaming on Bandcamp, you need to have it. If you're doing streaming on Apple Music or Spotify, they kind of take care of those mechanicals there. But if you're doing streaming from other places, you need to have some licenses, because you need to cover yourself and make sure that if somebody who owns that song is coming after you, like if you play, I don't know, Stardust, for example, you need to, the Hoagie Carmichael estate might want to come after you if you don't pay for the mechanicals on their composition, right? So you need them anytime you're going to release something, and that's not in the public domain. Basically, if somebody else owns the tune, you've got to pay for it. You got to pay for it. So there's three types. At one more time, there's physical mechanicals. There's streaming, like a permanent stream, like you're streaming it on your website, for example. And then you have, the third one would be digital downloads. So if you're selling on Bandcamp or something like that, you got to pay for the covers. You can buy them a little bit at a time, 50 at a time, 100 at a time. And if you go platinum and you sell tens of thousands, you can go back and buy more. So we usually always just advise people to buy 100, and then they can always get 100 more, 50 more, whatever, as things progress. But you want to be covered. You don't want to get yourself in trouble later on. So definitely take care of that if you're releasing some music. Hope that answers your question, Alan. But that's what you need mechanical licenses for streaming for. Spotify and Apple Music pay theirs through Sound Exchange. So if you're not registered with Sound Exchange, you need to make sure you're registered with Sound Exchange. And that's also, so there's like all these different things. You want to be on Sound Exchange. You want to be on a PRO like BMI or ASCAP. And you want to make sure you're registering all of your tunes with Song Exchange. So make sure you're on all of those three platforms, or three platforms, and make sure you get the mechanicals. Don't be that guy, because I think you can like release stuff on CD Baby and stuff without necessarily proving that you have it, but you don't want to get caught in a legal mess like later. So please take care of those things. So thanks for being here, and we'll catch you next time.